Hall of Fame trainer Dave O'Sullivan knew there was something special about Mr. Tiz from the first day he saw him being prepared for the yearling sales. O'Sullivan's experienced eye could tell Mr. Tiz was built to gallop, and he paid $110,000 at the 1986 sales. It wasn't hard to find owners, and in the following seasons, they shared the outstanding success of Mr. Tiz. The ability was obvious from the first starts, 2 places and then a maiden win. His 4th race was the Hawke's Bay Guineas.
And through on the inside, Dalpic, Mr. Tiz right there. Festal is making a brilliant late dab there right across the track. Mr. Tiz, Higgins, and down the outside is Dalpic. More, it's close, Mr. Tiz and Festal and Dalpic. Nothing in it.
There was plenty of horse knowledge amongst the O'Sullivans at Wexford stables. Dave and Paul were leading co-trainers, and Lance was the top jockey. Yet it took them another couple of months to unlock the real potential of Mr. Tiz. Dave suggested Lance sit back on Mr. Tiz in a 1200-metre race at Pukekohe to see what happened. When Lance finally released Mr. Tiz from the rails, it was electrifying. The gelding producing the finishing burst that would become the pattern for his great victories.
They get to the 200, Pukekohe the leader, Mr. Tiz out after it with big strides, then Italian Affair lying third from Stanley. It's Pukekohe, Mr. Tiz going to it though as they go towards the post, and Mr. Tiz the favourite got up to beat Pukekohe. Third at the line, Stanley on the outside of Italian.
The O'Sullivans knew they had a potential champion, and one they had to treat carefully. Mr. Tiz had issues with sesamoiditis and needed to be brought along carefully. They targeted the Railway Handicap in 1989 for the first shot at Group 1 glory.
Not much between them. Mr. Tiz giving a bit of cheek between the two. Campbell getting anxious on Westminster. Her Royal Highness is fighting well. Mr. Tiz is fighting on as well. Westminster, Mr. Tiz coming at it on the outside at the post. Westminster a nose, I think, to Mr. Tiz. Nothing in it.
And there was nothing in it. It was a dead heat between Mr. Tiz and Westminster. 3 weeks later, Mr. Tiz was lining up in the Telegraph Handicap for a second Group 1.
And Mr. Tiz galloping right down the outside and Merritt poking through on the inside. It's Festal in front, Mr. Tiz and Merritt through on the inside. Festal just in front, and it's going to be Festal, and Mr. Tiz was wide out. The angle will be in his favour.
Mr. Tiz's sprint catching Festal on the line for another dead heat. The Wexford stable star stamped his class on New Zealand sprinting by repeating the rare Railway Telegraph double in the following season. A heavy track, no obstacle as Mr. Tiz buried his opposition at Ellerslie. The O'Sullivans then took Mr. Tiz to Sydney. He didn't quite live up to expectations with a 4th at Rosehill and a 6th at Randwick. 1200 metres was the ideal distance, and an unprecedented third railway looked a certainty in 1991, until Mr. Tiz was almost knocked out of the race just before the final turn. The horse refused to give up and continued to charge after the leaders.
And Lancaster Square, Mr. Tiz is storming home late, and it's still, he's blushing in front. Here's Foreign Influence. Watch Mr. Tiz. Oh, geez, good. Mr. Tiz has got up from an impossible position.
It was one of the unforgettable moments at Ellerslie. Yet 3 months later, Mr. Tiz produced an even better performance in Sydney. The Galaxy is one of the premier sprint races, and Mr. Tiz went from second last at the turn to record one of the great wins by a New Zealand horse on Australian turf.
The 200 mark, Festal is tackled by With Me on the outside. Show County's gone. It's With Me coming at Festal. Varicos is starting to charge home in 3rd place, but getting close to home. Festal, With Me, Varicos, and look at Mr. Tiz. He's going to beat them all. Mr. Tiz, the New Zealander, has come from second last, and that's his real form today.
The fight back from a seemingly impossible position showed the heart of a champion, and finally won the respect of Australian race fans.
Well, that's the real Mr. Tiz. That's the kind of form that the horse has shown in New Zealand. You couldn't believe how fast this horse finished.
Mr. Tiz went into an honoured retirement at Wexford stables at the end of '91. The ligament trouble that caused concern early in his career finally caught up with him. The record of 17 wins, 3 railway handicaps, 2 telegraphs, and the finishing burst in the Galaxy setting the benchmark for New Zealand sprinters. Dave O'Sullivan won the Trainers' Premiership 11 times. He trained Horlicks to win the Japan Cup Surfers Paradise to victory in the Cox Plate, and Waverley Star to the most memorable second in the same race. Yet he always retains the ultimate accolade for Mr. Tiz, regarding him as the greatest racehorse he's ever trained.